So let me talk about Alex Preddy. Alex Preddy was a nurse at the VA. I happen to have a son who's 31 years old, who spent 5 years in the United States military as a combat medic. But toward the end of his deployment and the end of his service, he wanted to go into nursing, and so he did. And ended up getting an RN degree and works in the healthcare system here in Minnesota. And when he was at work today and last night, he said, look, my colleagues were crying and in tears, and they took this hit to one of their own very personally. And he said, I did too. He said, I didn't find myself shedding tears, but I could have, because I just was brokenhearted, because I know the service that he and the love and compassion he puts into taking care of the people he took care of at the VA. An intensive care nurse, kind, compassionate person to friend and family, described by coworkers as the first person who would jump in to help. He was our neighbor, and he should still be with us right now. So let me just note that Superintendent Drew Evans of the BCA, another exemplary professional in our state, he is the BCA is the state's investigative agency, and it is their job to investigate crime. They have a specialized unit to investigate the use of force cases. They arrived on site after the shooting and were refused access. They then secured a judicial warrant, a warrant signed by a judge, which has never been needed before, and were still refused access. This is uncharted territory. Now, friends, this comes at the tail end of other offenses, like a shooting in North Minneapolis and another homicide in South Minneapolis, Renee Nicole Good, where they also were denied access to the scene, and investigators are, to this moment, still being denied access to the investigative file. This is not a rash decision for us to go to court and to seek a temporary restraining order from a judge to preserve evidence and prevent the destruction of evidence. I don't care if you're conservative, liberal, or whatever, but you should at least be in favor of conserving evidence in a homicide. And to have to go get an order from a judge to preserve that evidence is extraordinary and should alarm everyone who believes in equal justice under the law and who believes that every person, no matter how this case ultimately is resolved, deserves to have their case investigated to get to the truth of what happened. This is an extraordinary moment in an unprecedented time, and we're doing all we can to step up to that moment. My office represents the BCA and joined the Hennepin County Attorney's Office in a lawsuit last night, as you know, and we moved to prevent the destruction and or tampering with evidence related to Alex Preddy's shooting. And this includes any evidence the federal agents took from the scene of the shooting, preventing the state authorities from inspecting it. We've never had to do anything like this before. Never before. We filed that motion last night and for a temporary restraining order asking the court to take immediate action to preserve the evidence. And last night, within 2 hours of the filing, a judge granted the motion. The Department of Homeland Security and the federal government are now enjoined from destroying or altering evidence related to yesterday's shooting. The fact that anyone would ever think that an agent of the federal government might even think about doing such a thing was completely unforeseeable only a few weeks ago. Yeah. But now, this is what we have to do. As we said in our filing last night, the irreparable harm we would suffer if the federal government were allowed to destroy evidence is so weighty that any harm to the federal government does not even budge the scales in a court balancing of the scales. It's imperative that we preserve as much evidence as possible so that the state investigators are allowed to access the evidence to ensure a fair, thorough investigation. And I will say, I've heard not one single law enforcement or investigative agent in the state of Minnesota say that they won't share information with the federal government. I've heard quite the opposite from the federal government.